Yes. Er zijn er 11 tegelijk aan het kijken. Kijk een keer. Laat u eens horen in de chat, zodat ik weet wie dat er is. Tenminste studenten zijn of alumni. We gaan een coole oefening maken. Welkom, welkom. Oké, het zijn de studenten. Meestal word ik zo half aangevallen door alumni en dan beginnen die grapjes te maken in de chat en zo. Dus vandaar. Goed zo. Goed, hopelijk vooral als er al vragen zijn, stel ze gerust. Ik ga een demootje geven van, kan ik er spieken? Ik denk dat Postman misschien wel een goeie is. Of zijn er, ik laat even tijd, zijn er specifieke zaken waarvan dat je een demo zou willen zien? Of niet? Dus geef maar mee in de chat. De HTML-pagina. HTML-pagina is inderdaad het moeilijkste van die eerste setup. Wel, laten we dat nu even doen. Ik heb nu een basisprojectje snel aangemaakt. Ik zal mijn HTML-pagina aanmaken, dus we zullen dat even snel doen. Ik ga even de correcte site er terug bij nemen. Oeps. Voilà. En dan Express. Nee, deze heb ik nodig voor de oefening straks. Express.js. Goed, bij static files. Ik ga eerst even die hello world kopiëren. Dan is dat in orde. Goed, ik hoop dat de meesten nu wel al ondertussen een basis Express appje hebben. Dus dit is een basis. Ik denk dat dit ook nog duidelijk is voor te lezen. Ik heb echt veel te weinig ruimte op mijn scherm daarvoor. Goed. Nu, ik ga even de muziek afzetten. Voilà. Dus, wat we hebben is... even kijken. Een basisapplicatie. Ik ga die even runnen. Index.js. Als ik erop ga, krijg ik hello world. Oké, die werkt perfect. Goed. Nu, dit is de basis. Wat heb ik gemaakt? Ik heb een npm-project gemaakt. npm init koppelteken y. Ik heb npm install express en body parser al ingevoerd. Dat is voor later body parser. Dat hoef je nu per se niet te hebben. Dat is deze package. Ik ga het even in de chat zetten. Voilà, dat is voor de chat. En dan heb ik ik heb mijn boardgames al gekopieerd, maar dat moet je natuurlijk niet doen. Dat is voor oefening 2. Een index.js met de basic Hello World applicatie. En dat is het zowat. Voilà. Dus Matthias had de vraag van hoe krijg ik die HTML-pagina daarin? Wel, die HTML-pagina Dat leg ik ook rustig uit, uiteraard, in die tutorial. Dus bekijk het daar eens. Maar om er even snel doorheen te gaan. Je kan statische files aanbieden. Dus stel nu voor dat je hier in deze folder een file hebt. Laten we zeggen logo.png. Je gaat niet aan dat logo geraken als dit het enigste is dat je API voorstelt. Je gaat nooit niet kunnen localhost 3000/logo kunnen doen. Dat lukt niet. Dus we gaan op een of andere manier statische files serven van een bepaalde folder. En dan maken we dus een public folder bij. Dus we gaan naar onze folder waarin dat we aan het werken zijn. Je maakt een folder public, of assets, of HTML, of whatever dat je wilt. Maar ik noem het graag public, omdat ik weet dat alles wat ik daarin plaats, dat laat ik effectief over aan de... Of dat laat ik effectief door de API publishen. Dus dat mag publiek gesteld worden. Daarin maak ik een HTML-file. Index.html. Ik vul die HTML op. Voilà. Al voorbereidend, hè. Goed, voilà. Als ik te snel ga of er moet iets herhaald worden, smijt het in de chat alstublieft en dan kunnen we daarmee verder. Dus ik heb een HTML-pagina. Wat heb ik hier? De root. Dus get hub, die gaat documentatie. Dus dat is deze file dat we gaan zien. De andere route die we gaan maken, get/boardgames. Die gaat get all board games doen. Dus het is maar dummy data. Hè. Vul in wat je wilt. En get board game. Dus dat zijn de 3 eerste routes. Daarna is nog 7. Ik ga die er ook even bij zetten direct. Dus dat is een post. Even spieken naar de oefening. Save board game. Oh ja, daar moet overal API voor. Oké. Dus save board game. Voilà, dat is mijn HTML-pagina. Hoe wil ik die serven? Wel, als ik naar mijn index ga, ik zeg eigenlijk, die data staat hier, ik zorg ervoor dat al mijn statische files geserved worden vanuit de folder public. Dus dat wil zeggen, app use, alles wat binnenkomt, express static, al mijn statische files gaan in public. Die public verwijst naar de publieke pagina hier. Nu, je ziet, ik heb geen route naar index.html. Of ik kan het zelfs, ik ga het nog iets anders noemen, want index is altijd zo, dat gaat vanzelf. Hè? Dus info.html. Die wordt normaal gezien niet automatisch geserved. Dus ik heb hier niks naartoe. Als ik naar root ga, ga ik hello world krijgen. Ik ga dat even testen. Hello world, voor even dubbel te checken. Ik ga hello world 2. Is hem nog aan het runnen? Ja. En als ik nu /info.html doe, dan heb ik mijn file. En dat werkt. Oké. Meer is dat niet. Nu, ideaal, wat je eigenlijk doet, is eigenlijk vooral ervoor zorgen dat wanneer je naar gewoon de API surft, dat je direct de documentatie krijgt. En dan kunnen we dus een redirect doen. Dus een redirect hier. Dat was een statuscode ook, hè. Status 300, denk ik dat het was. 300. En dan redirect. En we gaan redirecten naar wat? We gaan naar info.html. En normaal gezien moet dat werken. Ik ga het testen, hè. Als ik nu naar localhost 3000 ga, save, dan gaat hij naar, automatisch naar info.html. En op deze manier importeer je, of kan je eigenlijk HTML-zaken gaan in orde brengen. Nu, Waarom is dat belangrijk dat er in die public staat? Door het feit dat die public nu publiek staat, als het ware, kan ik hier een CSS-file aan toevoegen. En kan ik van hieruit dan info, kan ik hier... link kan ik hier wel spreken style.css. Die CSS gaat hem... Oeps. Die CSS gaat hem niet vinden, tenzij dat hij inderdaad hier ook in staat. Dus inderdaad style.css. Laten we even zeggen body. Hoe is het lang geleden dat ik CSS heb geschreven? Background color. Gaan we Azure pakken. En text color. Iets crimson. Voilà. Save. Normaal gezien. Voilà. De sessie heeft ook automatisch die zaak opgepakt. Als die style eruit zet, kan ik even gewoon hier die style hierin plaatsen. Uiteraard gaat die niet vinden, want die staat hier niet in. Dus die style hoort er ook mooi bij. Voilà. Oei. Dat moet ik doen. Is dat duidelijk voor jou, Matthias? Alles is ook nogmaals opgenomen, uiteraard. In dat filmpje. Goed. Wat ik eigenlijk ging doen, ik ging sowieso al een filmpje maken voor die boardgames oefening. Dus wat ik ga doen, ik ga die boardgames oefening gewoon live on stream maken. Ik ga dat recorden. Ik ga het achteraf een beetje knippen waar nodig. En dan load ik dat ook op als een coding along sessie. Dus ik ga een aantal zaken wegdoen. De HTML ga ik wel bijhouden. Ik ga alles wel deleten. Ik ga vanaf scratch beginnen. Hè. Gaat wel in het Engels zijn. Dus irreversible, dat is allemaal goed. Oeps, C. Stop. De data. En public. Ga ik ook even wegdoen. Index weg. Package log, package info. Oké. Altijd leuk om een keer gewoon alles kapot te doen voordat je terug begint, hè. Alles, hè. Oeps, oeps. Als er nog vragen zijn, probeer ze nu even te stellen. Als je nog een demootje wilt, want dan ga ik beginnen aan de tutorial van die boardgame oefening. En ik ga ook recorden. En dan ga ik enkel pauzes laten waar nuttig. En dan kan ik het er ook later uitknippen. 2 vliegen in 1 klap. Ik kan niet garanderen dat je gaat kunnen meevolgen. Oké, de desktop mag even weg. Sync mag ook weg. Nee. Ja. Mag ook weg. En Postman hebben we nog nodig. Mr. Boerak. Moet je niet komen zeggen dat TypeScript beter is dan JavaScript, hè. Belangrijk. Goed. Alright. Maar gezien is dat duidelijk. Dat is Postman. Dat is voor subiet. Alright, we gaan eraan beginnen, hè. PHP for life. Alright. Dus nog één ding opzoeken. Ik weet wel weer hoe ze, maar query. Ja, oké. Even recorden. Alright, hi and welcome to a tutorial on how to make a fully fleshed API. It's more of a coding along actually for an exercise that is on Canvas. My name is Mike de Rijk and I'm a teacher at Erasmus Hogeschool Brussels. Now, as you can see on the right side, we have the exercise. So exercise 2, we will make a demo web server based on board game data. As you can see here, we have 3 board games. And we need to get some routes in there. So we need to have a get routes to retrieve all the board games. We need to have a format that returns a route. Sorry, that returns one board game, and we need to have the we need to have the post route, of course, to save a board game. So 3 important routes that can that make up the bulk of any decent API. So you know what? Let's get started. Ik heb al eerst even moeten pauzeren, want mijn marker systeem staat hier niet op. Zo ga ik niet veel kunnen doen. Dag Alex. Dag Axel, sorry. Wacht even, ik moet even kijken naar mijn switch to scene. Page up. Ik ga soms af en toe een pauze laten, omdat ik markers nodig heb voor timecodes. Dus als het een beetje awkward klinkt, geen probleem. Alright, to get started, of course, I have some demo data. I have an info HTML that just describes all the routes that I need. We have a route. We have board games, we have board game ID, and we have save board game. There are some best practices that I'm not following here, but this is to make sure that we have 3 very different routes and to test our Postman setup later. I have some basic CSS. That's it. And I have, of course, the data folder with the board games. Now, to get started, we need to make our setup. Of course, this is an npm project. So npm init-y. Then we need to install. Express. And later we will need body parser. For the posting, that is. Good. Now we have the package is ready. We don't have a script yet, so we will make a script. Index.js. Index.js will be using Express, so const express equals require Express. Our app will be created with this. Let's see if I can type it by heart, because normally I just use the demo code. We're gonna have our port. We're gonna set it to a different number this time to show you that it's possible. Const. Good. Then I will create my server. Listen. The listen will use the port as the first variable, and the second variable will be a callback function. And then a console log. Server is running. API is running at port. I will add one get route, just to set the route. Of course, every route, get, post, put, delete, whatever you want, has two parameters at least. So the URL itself, and then of course a function, a callback function with a request and a response. Okay. And let's just res.send. Everything is okay, because we want everything to be okay. So this is a very basic and a sample application, of course. Let's see if this works. So nodemon index run. API is running at port 1337. That's good. So you know what is running at HTTP localhost, because then it's easier to click. Et voila, everything is okay. Perfect. Now, of course, I will be using Postman to test everything. So if I call Postman, if I use Postman for all this, I will create for this project a new collection. So every call that I make is located in that collection. So for instance, we have our, let me check, new collection. That collection will have a name, board game API, and I will create a new request, a get request to HTTP, not 3000-1337, save, the request is the root. If I press send, everything is okay, and we're off to the races. Yo, welkom in de chat. Ken. Goed. Ik ben een opname bezig, dus ik ga niet altijd reageren. Maar ik kan altijd vragen stellen en dan pauzeer ik de recording waar mogelijk. Alright, so we have our Postman. Then, of course, we can make sure that our info HTML is shown instead of this simple send. So I will create a public folder that will host all my HTML and CSS that is publicly available. And then I will make sure that all static files are used in that way. So I'm going to make a middleware. Express dot, I think it's static, so all static files. What does it say? Static built-in middleware function. It serves static files and it's based on serve static. Okay, good enough by me. We will have call it public, and this way everything in here will be served as public. So if I serve to slash, I think it's called info.html, I automatically get the HTML, but what I really want is that this is automatically sent back to the documentation. So I'm going to make sure the status goes 300 because it's a redirection. And I am going to redirect to info.html. Save. So if I just adjust my code now, send, and we have our example. So public files have been accessed. Now I think it's time to get to give the board games back. All right. To continue, we will make a new route, so board games, and that will return the JSON file here. So, of course, to read files, we need the file server module. So const fs equals require. Let's go with the promises API, fs/promises, and then we will do the root route. Then the next one will be app.get board games slash, whoops, board games. Of course, a new function. And we're good to go. So now this route exists. Of course, we need to get the file. Return all board games from the file. So what I will do here is, of course, to make sure that this function is asynchronous, because we're going to be using await. So what we will do is read the file, send back the file. That's it. So try catch around it just in case it fails. Let data equals await fs.readFile, I think it was, and then say data slash board games .json. So we will wait until this is read. Missing catch. Voila. If this succeeds, then it's okay and we can send it back. So read the file, send back the file. That's what we will do here. Again, don't forget comments across all your code. Very important. If we have an error, let's do that first. Then we will send back rest.send status. The file could not be read, so that means the status is 500 because it's an error on our side. Send file could not be read. Try again later. Voila. So that means that if we call this route and the file doesn't exist or crashes, then we get an error itself. Now, if we send back the file, res.status 200, everything is okay. Send data. And of course, that's, I think I'm going to be stringifying that. Well, let's see what happens. All right, let's test what we just wrote and then fix whatever comes across. So as you can see, it's not a lot of code. Let's see what we have. All right, so we have our Postman. I will create a new request. The request will be a GET request, and it will be to /board games. Board games. Let's see what we get. Perfect. But it isn't text. Let me see if it's JSON. Yep, it's JSON compatible. And we get all the data back. Now imagine if the file was broken. Let's just delete the N. And let's make the call again. File could not be read, try again later. So you see, if this throws an error or if something goes wrong, then this response will be sent to the user. You see that the internal server error is correctly given, 500. If you've noticed the theory, you know that what type of code this is. And for a correct one, we have 200, as you can see. It does send back JSON format. So let me check. Oh, it's a string. Maybe if we can parse it, JSON.parse. If we parse it to an actual object, does this get recognized as a JSON? Yes, it does. So, important to know, of course, when we read something from a file, it's a regular string. If you want to actually have a type of, like an actual object, you have to parse it. And Express knows that if you send an object back, well, you basically have a JSON file. Perfect. Good. Now that we have our board games section, let's see if we can get a specific board game from the list. Beetje pauze laten natuurlijk. Voor de knipjes in Premiere Pro. So the next part will be to get a specific board game. So based on the ID. Now we have our route. As you can see, this is the route that we need to create. I'm just going to copy paste it in here so that we know the structure of it. So as you might see, the route itself has a query string attached to it. Now, it's been a while since I've done this, but you know what? Let's figure it out together. So we're going to make a new get request or get route board game. And again, rec res arrow function block. And let's see if we can res.send everything. Okay, let's just do that for now, and let's see if we can actually get a parameter from it. If I'm not mistaken, everything okay. So if we call board game, I'm going to get all board games. That is this route. Now I want to have another one. Duplicate. One board game. That's one board game. And now, of course, our route is going to be / board game. Of course, the route itself works. Done. Everything is okay. But what if we pass along something as a parameter? So we can either use in Postman, we can use the key value. So, for example, ID is 120677. I think that is Gloomhaven. As you can see, it will automatically update the URL. So it is recommended to use the query params so that you can just add them or delete them here instead of constantly adjusting the URL. So as you can see, let's do send. And of course, nothing changes. But let's try and log the query string in this piece of code. Of course, console logs here will only be shown here in the where the API is running. So this is our server. It will only be shown here. Let's see, console.log. And if I'm not mistaken, in the request that we get, there is something called query. And I think that is it. If not, we will have to Google, but no worries. Let's try and send it. Hey, look at that. Look at that. We are logging rec query, so that means whatever we get with the query string will be contained in this object. So even more specific, if I want the ID from the query string, I get the ID. Perfect. So now we can go and actually read the file, just like our previous route, and use that ID to find the correct board game and only give that back. Let's do that next. Are you not entertained? Even drinken. Ik weet dat ik behoorlijk snel ga, maar op zich... Dit is voldoende voor... dit is puur ook voor de tutorial achteraf. Die ga je kunnen herbekijken. Dat is volledig oefening 2. Uiteraard moet ik de woorden zeggen like, share, subscribe. Als dat nog niet gebeurd is, doen, zou ik zo zeggen. Op die manier kunnen meer studenten genieten van de kwaliteit die ik poog aan te bieden. Alright, terug beginnen. Okay, so we already have some material, so we can copy paste most of it. So let's see. Let's do this. Copy paste. We'll remove this. We don't need that. File could not be read. That's one error. Another error that we can send back is the board game is not found. That's also a possibility. So let's see if we can have read file. I'm going to read the file, and instead of sending it back, now I'm going to do some for loops, of course. Some for loops. I'm going to do the JSON parse data. Let's do BG, the actual board game. And I'm going to immediately parse the data the moment it comes out of the file. This should do the trick. So now I have data. Let me check. This is an object, so we have to do that nasty for in again. Yeah, of course, this is not an easy file to work with. If this was an array, we could just use a find parameter or something like that. Now, find is quite easy. I think in a previous example, I already used that. Now, let's use the for in. So, for example, we're gonna loop over data, or as we know now, it is board games. Board games for let's temp in board games. There's probably an option to search for in an object, but I'm not going to. Oh, wait, no. There's an easy way to do this. We don't even need to loop, if I'm not mistaken. So we have the ID. So if this is 120677, then we basically can do board games rec body ID. And this will automatically complete, like find the board game that we need. If this is undefined, then we will, let me check, then we will need to send an error back. Try and find the board game with provided ID. Okay, now let me just send back what we get. Cannot, oh, there are some issues. Missing argument. There is a missing argument on line 30. Await read file. That should do the trick. After await. It's possible. Probably not possible. Then okay. Fine. I'm not going to parse temp. Probably the await keyword doing nasty stuff. Await is only valid in async functions. Jesus, of course. Async. But I could have sworn that this works. Let me check again. As you can see. Yeah, okay. Never mind. I was still correct. Board games. Small detour because we forgot async in our function. So, let's see what we get back at this point. File could not be read. Boardgames.json. It's board game. Nope. well, we have issues here. File could not be read, so there's an error here. So again, let's make sure we can do this. And then file could not be read. So there is something wrong with the file, or there is an issue at least being thrown. Oh, let me just log the error, of course. As you can see, this is a coding along in the purest sense, as in, of course, I made mistakes as well. Cannot read property ID of undefined. Undefined. Board games is undefined. Okay. So the read file does not work. Let me check. Board games. Let me console log. Board games. Must be something wrong. There's a buffer. I parsed it. Ah, of course. Cannot need property ID. I thought this was the value. I thought this was the value. All right. Let me check. Oh, I just realized I made a mistake because this is rec body and not rec query. So a simple typo could make all the difference, so it seems. Let's make this query. Let's see what it does now. Finally. Okay, so now we got back Terra Mystica, so that perfectly works. We need to still prove some validation. Let's build that in now and then see what we can do to finalize this piece of code. Een stomme fout, hè? All right, after that stupid mistake of just somehow having the wrong ID in here, let's now finalize by sending back an error of the ID not existing or a correction just like this. So send back the file. So basically if BG is not undefined, because if I'm not mistaken, if I do this, we don't get anything back. I think the console log will tell us that BG, the board game that we are trying to get, is undefined. Let's verify that. Undefined. So that means we can do a very simple if statement. If BG, if it exists, that means we can send back the file. And to be clear, if you want to do something afterwards, just the return statement closes the call as well, and then this function is done. Second part, else, if it does not exist, we send back an error. Board game could not be found. And in this with ID, we can even place the ID behind it to verify, like, oh yeah, I gave the wrong ID. So in here, of course, this is a 400 error. This the error is on the user because the ID is wrong. While here the error is 500 because the file could not be read. That's our problem. That's the problem of the server. So let's try again. We have board game could not be found. If I add a 7, we get back a fancy JSON object of course, Terra Mystica, an amazing game that is located in our file. Now we have our second route done. The third one that we need to do is actually saving a board game to that file. Let's start with that. All right, so the next post request, or the next request basically is a post request, and we're going to be doing a save board game. And now Postman will play a bigger role into testing this, because of course now we cannot surf to the URL anymore in our browser. We need to do a post request from here. So let's create the call first. Let's duplicate this and call it save board game. You just get one board game, get all board games, save board game. Of course, this is not a GET request. This is a POST request. So, of course, we don't have the simple IDs. We don't have these. I'm going to delete this. It is the same. No, it's not the same URL. It's save board game. Now, something interesting to know is that we can have the same URL twice, but one for a get and one for a post. If I do a post request now to /boardgame, it will say that it doesn't exist. The URL is the same, as you can see here. So if we do a call, it will search for it. It will not find it, and it says could not send request. I'm just thinking that my server is also not running anymore. So this is the error we get, cannot post board game. If we create this a get, then it will say could not be found with ID, because I of course did not provide an ID. So if we tell it to be a post game, then we need an extra route here. Save a board game. App.post. Then we have /save board game. Again, best practices would tell me that I would have board game, that I would have one name for everything, but for our case, that's not necessary for now. again, callback function with the request, the response, et voila. Save board game, and now we're there. So just like we had, let's do res.send. Okay, to cleanly close off our piece of code. And instead of request.query, now of course we have the body, because we will be adding data to the body of it. We saw that in the theory, as in it will only just be, you can only pass along big pieces of data in the body of a request. So if we were to log this, let's see what we get. We make our request. Of course, there is no body at the moment. Cannot post to board game. We called our route save board game. And we get okay. But we don't log anything in the body. Now, of course, this is because in Postman, you have to fill the body. I'm going to save this as well. So here, the body, you have the type that you can pass along. So I mostly preferred raw. That's one quote you can place out of context. But of course, not text. We like to have JSON. So a very simple data set would be name. Whoops. Name. Well, let's do first name. First name. Mike. And now, technically, we should see this. Let's see. And we still get undefined. Now, this is very weird because we are passing it along. I am for sure that it comes to my API, but somehow this is not filled up. Now, there's something to be done. The body is unrelated, is unstructured. So we need to structure it with another tool called the body parser. We've already imported it with npm install body parser. Now let's use it as a piece of middleware that will make sure that all our bodies are transformed into perfectly fitted JSON objects. Okay, so we have installed body parser with npm install. Now we can include it into our script. So const body parser require body dash parser. Now we have the body parser, and we can make use of it as a middleware. So that means every request that passes through our API, we can actually convert. So what we'll be doing app use body parser dot JSON. That means it converts everything to JSON. Now let's throw that board game again. And look here, we have data that we can actually use. So now we have a body. It's basically as simple as completing to save the board game with knowledge we already have from Node, saving the board game with fsWrite file, and writing the file to our existing file, of course, the boardgames.json. Good. I have prepared some data here. So Tapestry, of course, very amazing game from Stonemaier Games. Really recommend it. I've placed some data in here that I created so that it matches the data that's already present in boardgames.json. So as you can see here, I send it and the data is perfectly console logged in here. So now the Postman part is done. Let's save that request so it's in there. And then I can actually work on these parts. So we know it's in request.body. It's perfectly formed. So that means we need to get the file, add to it, and then go from there. So I think this has an ID. Doesn't this have an ID? This doesn't have an ID, so I need to add an ID because we are saving by ID. ID. For now, I will use 1234 because I don't know the actual ID, board game ID of Tapestry itself. But that ID needs to be, of course, the key in this board game.json. Again, I took a very complex JSON file to work with, but you know, let's try it anyway. Let's see. We have our post requests. Then, of course, we have some existing code already. Pass the board game. Read the file. Of course, this is without any control or validation. I will not be inputting this in this session. But of course, you can validate if certain values are present before you enter that one. So that means to create a new one. Board games, it's a new property, so that means we are going to create the ID. We are going to pass along the ID. Let's set up. So the ID is from rec.body.id. Don't know if this will work, but we'll see. And we will name genre mechanisms body.name, and we will basically, I think it's description, genre mechanisms, so an S in the back, and the last part is description. Description. Good. So we basically tell the existing object, which is this one, to have a new ID, and then of course everything from Tapestry. We can do an if statement. If none of them are available, then the format is incorrect. We can do that very easily, as in we do that in the beginning. Validation is quite easy. Let's just add it. So if, and then if there is no rec.body.id, or, and you see where I'm going with this? I'm just checking if all the fields that I need are available. And I can even do more. So if ID, name, genre, mechanisms, and description are not available, we will send it back and immediately stop this piece of code. So res.status, it's 400 because the request is bad, dot send bad request, missing ID, name, genre, mechanisms, or description. And of course, afterwards, because we send it back, return, so the function is done. So this very easy validation statement will automatically stop your code if the data that you are sending is not correct. So we can continue. If it's there, then we can save it again. Normally we should have added it. And then we do, oh wait. Nothing here is in a try catch. So let's try throw it in a try catch. We're almost there. We are almost there. I will steal the error. Here, and I will say an error has occurred. Help. If something goes wrong, we can put it in there. So read the file, board games. So we can do more try-catch statements, of course, because now we don't know if something crashes, if it's the read file or the write file. Save the file. Send back success message. We know that. The response.send status would be 201 because 201 is standard for updated. Send board game successfully saved with ID, and then of course we add the ID so you can verify rec.body.id and save the file. Await fs.write file, so we're going to overwrite the complete file, json.stringify, and we're going to stringify board games. And I think that will do it. Time to test it. Quite nervous because I don't know if it will work. Send. An error has occurred, help. That is great. Let's console log the error. All right. Let's see what happens. Send. Cannot set headers after they are reset to client. Return statement needs to be here. The data needs to be of type string. Let me check. 464. 88. Ah, oops. Okay, there was still a response done. So of course, these are all waiting, but in that case, like I'm still trying to throw an extra response. That's not the point, of course. Let's try again. Send has occurred. The data argument must be of type string. At line 76. I thought this was a... Oh, no. This is... Yeah, I made a mistake. I'm going to save it in data/boardgames.json. And of course, the second parameter is the data. That's my mistake. Send board game successfully saved with ID 1234. Now, of course, how do we verify that? Well, we are on the server. We can check. Let's see what it does. Beautify file. So we have 1234 tapestry. We have Terra Mystica. We have Gloomhaven and Food Chain Magnets. Perfect. Now we are done. You can build some validation in here. Is like if the ID already exists, you can send back, hey, this already exists. You cannot save this. You can do some more stuff with it. You can customize this to your liking. Now, of course, everything in here is done. I hope this was a good explanation of how to build an API completely from scratch with a get all, a get one, and a post request in combination with Postman itself. So I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bam, de recording is gedaan. Ik ga wel hier en daar wat moeten knippen. Ik heb inderdaad wat fouten gemaakt, maar daarvoor laat ik die pauzes, want dan zie je dat makkelijker in Premiere Pro. Goed. Zijn er vragen? Ik heb er nu inderdaad wel doorgeraced. Ah, Bo. De livestream pro, dat is de JavaScript pro. Als je advies wilt geven, Bo, aan tweedejaars, nu is het moment. Hè. De rest is waarschijnlijk aan het werken. Dus... Hoe lang was de opname eigenlijk? Ik zal even moeten kijken. Lees uw documentatie. Beste commentaar ooit. De beste nest, de beste tips. Ja. Oh my god. People on screen. Gotta give the people what they want. Ziet dat er nog deftig uit? Belangen niet, dat ziet er niet meer deftig uit. Ai, ai, ai. Ai, ai, ai. Ai, ai, ai. Goed. QWERTY keyword, QWERTY voor de win. Als ik één tip mag geven, switch zo snel mogelijk over op QWERTY, zodat je effectief kunt deftiger tippen. Nee, het is lelijk. Ah, ik heb alles kapot gedaan. Ik heb een kiek kaart. Ja, ik denk dat dat K8 is. Ja, K8. En ik heb met een goede vriend A.S. die jullie wel niet onbekend is, heb ik andere switches besteld. Dus deze zijn bruine, nee, rode. En ik heb nu bruine en blauwe besteld. Kwestie voor lekker af te wisselen. En jij ook de bruine? Ik wist wel dat jij de bruine had, Bo. Ik wist wel dat jij de bruine had. Als er nog vragen zijn voor effectief de mensen die... Er zijn minstens 3 alumni in, dus dat wil zeggen dat er zeer weinig studenten aan het kijken zijn. Maakt niet uit, ik heb het toch opgenomen. Ik ga dit hier even afwerken. Dat er inderdaad... If. If. Als boardgames. Rainbow ID. Als dat bestaat. Axel, wat doe jij nu in het werkveld, hè? Ook JavaScript? Of er vanaf afgestapt? Dan gaan we hier. Board game already exists. Board game already exists. If I change this. Oh, API's zijn zo tof om mee te werken, hè. Bam. Created. Op het moment dat je kunt data heen en weer sheeten. Toppie. WebGL. Niet om te zeveren, maar hoe goed zijt jij met WebGL? Heb je voorbeelden? Toen ben ik hier een demo, jongen. Bubbel kapot. Whoops. Ah, mijn YouTube kwijt. Second. Door Discord heen gestuurd. Die een keer open op stream. Je ziet hoe goed dat is, hè. Graag gedaan, Matthias. De demo is uiteraard opgenomen. Ik ga hem, ik denk nu gewoon editen. En dan komt die... Ik ga die waarschijnlijk morgen uploaden. Dus we zullen zien. De schijf. Start experience. Is dat iets dat je zelf gemaakt hebt voor de fun, Axel? Just in case, voor context te hebben? Of is dat voor een bedrijf dat je dat gemaakt hebt? Cool. Oh. Een demoproject voor klanten. Ah ja, oké. Ah, Pijltjes werken ook. Dat. Oh. Heel veel geluid. Wacht, ik ga het even... Zo. Special objects. Ah ja. Tof. Echt boeiend om te zien. Als je eens een gastles wilt komen geven, Axel, altijd welkom, hè. Want er zijn heel veel mensen die vragen hebben voor WebGL. We praten later wel. Was dat nu klikbaar? Terug naar 8. Ah nee, on hover. Ah, oh, oh, oh. Côte d'Azur, joh. Dat is toch geen 3D-render? Ah nee, dacht ik al. Ah, dat is mijn vakantievilla met de centen dat ik verdien als docent. Dat is het. Zoiets, joh. Privé saunake. Prachtig. Is dat een volledige render? Oh, wauw. Dat is wel tof. Ja, oké, ja, dat gaat zo. Oké. Maar ik dacht al, ik zeg, oftewel zijn er artefacten in dat filmpje, oftewel is het een render. Ik dacht eigenlijk dat het artefacten waren. Want je ziet inderdaad af en toe zo'n klein beetje pixelatie. Zeer fancy. Impressed. All objects in the scene can be made clickable. Zijn er nog andere? Klik aan de pool. En dan tla. Ik ga verder, hè. Ik ben benieuwd nu. Ah ja, oké. Je kunt er andere zaken ook in verwerken. Animaties. Ja. Vaste walkthrough. Ah ja, oké. Scrolling. En we zijn er bijna. Wat is dit hier allemaal? Wauw. Oké. Dus dat is een soort van low poly versie. .360. Ik ben meer wel een jacuzzi mens, dus ga ik eens zien naar de jacuzzi, hè. Virtual reality blok. Oké. Dat is wel tof. En dan het laatste. Contact dus. Uiteraard. Get in touch. Alright. Axel, ik ga je een keer bellen. Dat is al niet geeft, joh. Ik ga je een keer bellen. Alright. Dat was het voor de demo. Ik ga het hierbij. Ik ga de livestream afsluiten. Als er nog vragen zijn, ik ben bereikbaar voor Teams. Ik ga wel af en toe een keer moeten heen en weer lopen voor een paar zaken. Dus als ik iets later reageer, don't shoot me. Maar ik ben beschikbaar, dus als je vragen hebt, kan je mij die altijd sturen. Goed. Ik zou zeggen, veel... ik ruik het sarcasme, Axel. Veel succes, veel plezier. En ik spreek jullie de volgende week hopelijk. Hè. Bye.